thank you for your time. Thank you for being here for the second time at the conference. So in your mandate letter from Prime Minister, you were tasked with creating a position of Chief Science Officer. Can you reflect on the role of this office and what we might expect to see from the position, and when we will expect to see this position to be launched?
I figured this was the first question. I'll start by saying, just weeks after taking on this role, we began the consultation for the Chief Science Officer. And it was an extensive consultation. I started by talking to chief scientists in Australia, the UK, the US, Israel, New Zealand.
Yes.
And there were multiple conversations. Our officials talked. We wrote to experts, stakeholders across the country. Thank you for your answers back. We've received over 80 substantial submissions around from the community, from experts, from stakeholders, and from parliamentarians across the political spectrum. I can tell you, I've been in Parliament for 7 years. No one ever asked me for my opinion. Good ideas don't come from one party only. And we're taking the time necessary to get it right. My concern, if we look historically, not only was the position eroded, it was removed. I want to ensure it has permanence, it has durability, and that we change the culture. What I will say going forward, I would hope in a matter of weeks, we will put out the call to all Canadians.
Okay, that was very good news. So we got precise timing. Thank you. And on one of your budget 2016 tasks was to launch an independent review panel for fundamental science funding by government. I'm just wondering, why was that necessary at this time, and what we might expect to see from this panel?
Thanks, Mehrdad. As I went across the country, what I heard is Canada generally has a good funding ecosystem, and I think we'd all agree with that. But we heard there were a number of challenges coming up, one certainly to do with young researchers. You can't get that first grant at 41 or 43. How we do multidisciplinary research, how we fund it, how we fund international, and how we fund multidisciplinary, multinational. There were some challenges. We also heard, we've never looked at the ecosystem. As a scientist, I found that extraordinary. So the ecosystem continued to grow, and I thought it was time, and we heard it was time to review this. So I was pleased to get that in Budget 2016. As I told you, it's a very comprehensive review. It is an independent panel. So I'm going to have to wait for the recommendations. There were some areas I did task the panel. One was about early career researchers. One was about diversity. I will look forward to the recommendations. We will review them carefully, and we'll decide on a course going forward over the next few years.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And in your speech, you mentioned, and I referred to your efforts on the international stage. And I'm just wondering, when you go to these summits, what's the reaction of the international community and the high-profile people that you meet in terms of Canada's commitment to, renewed commitment to science, and what really Canada has to bring to the table for the international community when it comes to science, technology, innovation?
Thanks, Mehrdad. Let me begin by saying people are happy that Canada is back, that science is back in Canada, and that science is back at the table. What we hear repeatedly is how much, and I know this, how much our research community is appreciated internationally. You know, I come from the university. You think you know the university, you think you know research, and as I go across this country, I am awed, humbled, inspired every day by the research that's being done. And that's what I hear when I go internationally. I think one of the things we bring to the table, and it was certainly at the G20, the idea of an inclusive innovation agenda to drive growth. When we went to the US White House ministerial, the idea that Indigenous and Northern communities have to be at the table and we have to work in partnership. That's something we add to the table. But I see my role as to be part of it, to be a champion for scientists, for researchers in science in Canada, and to champion the great work that many of you do internationally.
Thank you, Minister. If I may, you mentioned in your speech about the equity, and equity is one of the things that you have been mentioning and one of the focuses of your portfolio. I'm just wondering why it's so important to you, and why is a more equitable and diverse scientific community can further advance science?
Let me start with the data, with the evidence. So today in Canada, women earn about getting close to half of the undergraduate science degrees. That's good news. They earn about a quarter of the engineering degrees, so there's some work to do there. And as you move to master's and doctoral level, the numbers decrease further. In Canada, women earn about 33% of the doctoral degrees in science, compared to 49% in the UK and 46% in the US. If we look at the STEM workforce, in 1987, women accounted for about 20% of the STEM workforce. Today, it's 22%. I don't think any country can afford to lose half of its talent. I'll speak very personally for a moment. It's something I don't often do. I loved my job. I loved research and I loved my students. Was I asked at departmental meetings when I planned to get pregnant? Was I paid in the bottom 10th percentile? And when I asked how this could have happened, the answer was, well, you're a woman. I spent 25 years of my life fighting so that young women wouldn't face the challenges I did. But as I go across the country, and I make it a mission every time I go, that I have the opportunity to meet with researchers, that I have the opportunity to meet with young women. The challenges are the same: lack of mentors, lack of role models. We still have the lack of women in senior leadership positions, work-life balance. I don't expect to hear in 2016, I hid my pregnancy for 7 months by wearing larger lab coats. I came back to work 48 hours after giving birth because of fear. We cannot afford to lose our talent. Science needs women, science needs diversity, and science needs to reflect Canada. And I hope you see that we're taking action not only in Canada, but internationally. At Carnegie, Canada worked with Japan to pass a motion to make sure increasing the role of women was one of 3 subject areas studied.
That was quite touching. Thank you, Minister. You have served almost 1 year as a Minister of Science.
What is better than the 2 weeks last time I was here.
I'm sure that's true. What is your greatest accomplishment to date?
I find that an odd question, because this should never be about me. It's about the community I serve, and it's about Canadians. If I look back at the last year, Hopefully, we've strengthened science. Hopefully, we've made investments in our researchers and in the tools they need for the coming decades. Hopefully, we're starting those conversations within government so that we break down the silos, that we are building that science advisory role, that we change the culture, that it will have permanence, and that we're starting these hard discussions around diversity in science. And the last piece I would add is like many of you, you love the work you do. I want every child, all children are born curious. They want to discover, they want to explore. It's up to us to foster that love through school and hopefully beyond. I want all children to catch that excitement for science, to hopefully consider studying STEM disciplines, and hopefully to a wonderful, rewarding career that so many people in this room enjoy.
So for last question, if I modify the previous one and say, what legacy do you hope to leave behind?
That we have a science system in Canada that's well-funded, that we have a vision for science, a strong vision, what government science does, what the external community does, where we come together, where big science fits in, that we're building an inclusion in science in Canada, and that we work to inspiring every child to achieve their dream. I always told my own students, impossible is nothing. Impossible is a dare. And yes, there are challenges. I call them road speed bumps. You gotta figure a way over them or around them, and to take every challenge you're offered, to take every opportunity.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for this conversation.